Hi there. Welcome to New Tracks Modeling. New Tracks is an exciting new digital opportunity to obtain mentoring to help you improve your modeling. You will meet talented modelers and manufacturers from all over the world who share their model building skills and artistic advice. Improve your modeling and increase the confidence in your modeling efforts. Share your building efforts with fellow modelers and have some fun doing it. The shows are live on Zoom and YouTube, so be sure to join in and ask your questions. Now here is New Tracks founder and your host, Jim Kello, MMR.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really do appreciate it. Hope you'll come back often and tell your friends about us. Before we start the show, I'd like to introduce Father Ron Walters for the show's prayer. Father Walter.
O God, as we create and miniature the world around us, may we marvel at the beauty and the genius which created the world and instilled in us a portion of your great knowledge and wisdom. Give success to the work of our hands, O God. Amen.
Father, thank you so very much. We really do appreciate your help and enjoy your prayers, but also enjoy your modeling. If you have not joined our website yet, it's www.newtracksmodeling.com. And if you'll go to the website and subscribe, then you'll get a weekly email telling about what's on the show and giving you the login link for our Zoom part of the show. Our show is also live streamed to YouTube if you prefer to join us there. And you can participate in the show on YouTube through the chat function that's provided on that site. We have one viewer who has made a challenge grant for our scholarship program of $1,000 to be matched by small donations, anything under $80 or less. He will match up to $1,000. So if you're considering a donation to our scholarship, and it's very easy to do, you can do it using Zeffy, and you can get to Zeffy off of our website. And to get there, it's www.newtracksmodeling.com/scholarship. And that'll take you to the page. And on that page, it'll say, click here to make a contribution to the scholarship. You make a click there. You can use a credit card, however you want to pay for it. And we would appreciate your help, because whatever you donate up to $80, the challenger will match that up to a total of $1,000. So to get the whole $1,000, we're going to need people to make small contributions that add up to $1,000 overall. So if you have not contributed and you're thinking about it, any amount would be certainly appreciated, because every amount that is contributed is in effect $2 for every dollar that you contribute because of the matching grant. So if you're thinking about it, I would encourage you and hope that you'll look favorably on our scholarship program. Our next My Build, hosted by Chris Course, is going to be November the 22nd. And I'd like to turn it over to Chris now and have him talk about what you need to do to participate in that My Build.
Thanks, Jim. I was just coming up with a slide for December because it will be a theme show. So we will go to that first. It's not quite finished yet, but here it is. So in December, we will have the, come on, there we go. The December My Build, of course, again, is featuring you. It's a holiday theme. It'll be December 20th. To participate, email me your photos, railrunner130@hotmail.com. The items that fit in there, basically, it's holiday, it's Santa, Christmas, billboard cars, snow scenery, snow plows, people ice skating, holiday scenery, holiday decorations, those sorts of things. And not to be outdone, we also have the My Build in November. It's a regular free-for-all. That date is November 22nd. And again, email me your photos, railrunner130@hotmail.com, and try to get them to me by the Sunday before that, so that we can get a good slideshow put together. So I will turn it back over to you, Jim.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. I really do appreciate it. We had a great show last week. If you missed it, you can check it out on the our YouTube channel, New Tracks Modeling. But we had some great models shown, and we really appreciate the participation. One of the things Greg and I have talked about is expanding the show starting in January of 2024 to see if we can make it a whole show. Now, I'll have to admit, January and February are going to be a little crazy because of the features that we already have gotten scheduled for those months, but it'll work its way out as we go through the year. But what our intent is to try to take one show a month just for the My Builds, to give everybody that wants a chance to talk about it, to talk about what they're doing, maybe talk about what their workshop is like, maybe talk about what they'd like to see built that's in their closet right now that they haven't started yet. So we want to try to expand it to get more participation by the viewers. And Chris and I will be talking about how to do it and telling you more about it in the weeks to come. But that's where we're trying to go starting in January for the one for in January, toward the middle of January is when it'll be. So I wanted you to be aware of that, because it's, you know, whether we can fill up a whole show with the My Builds, we don't know. But I think that it's encouraging to both of us that we're getting more people involved in the My Build and more people sending multiple photos of models in for the My Build. So that's why we're going to try and see if we can get it expanded, and see if you all want to expand it, see if enough of you really want to try to participate and show what you're building, what you'd like to be building, what you're thinking about building, and so forth. So keep that in mind, because it's going to be up to you whether we can make this part work or not. Because if we can't make it work, because people just aren't interested in showing what they're building, then we'll cut it back to what we've been doing in the past. But we want to try to give it every possibility to expand it, to get more people interested in trying to show what they're modeling and what they're doing. So with that said, let's start tonight's show with Martin Brechbiel for his Scratch Building Corner. Martin, welcome.
Oh yeah, caught me off guard. I'm kicking this things off. I didn't know that was going to happen. Magical. Okay. Share screen. It's over there. That's moved. Okay. Well, we'll make it happen anyhow. There we are. It's number 3. Not to be confused with 1 or 2. So we're going to start something new tonight. It's another structure, and it's going to be wood. Since I'm not going to compete with styrene, we'll stay with wood, anything but styrene for as long as I can. How about that? So we're going to start with these doors, these laser cut doors. These came from Deerfield River. I got a bag of them. I don't know where or how, but the best way to make them go away is put them to use and build a model with them. They're rather nice. You got to make sure you get a left and a right hand door though out of the bag. I almost messed that up when I started out. And the left and right, you've got diagonals. You want 2 different diagonals on the back paneling, and a little wood glue assembles those. The walls are going to be clapboard. I'm not sure whose brand or whatever it is. It's whatever I had bits and pieces laying about. I'm going to salvage some scrap and put it to work in this model as best I can. It's either Northeastern or maybe Midwest, actually. There's at least 4 places you can get O-scale milled clapboard siding. So Those doors, the width of the doors pretty much sets the width of the front of this building. I don't know what the width is. I didn't measure it, but these are rather large doors. They're 8 by 8 feet when put together side by side. So they're pretty sizable. There's two sides. So pay no attention to the pencil line. That's from something else, from somewhere else, from some other project from once upon a time. It'll get a coat of paint over it eventually. But most clapboard comes what, 3-inch or 3.5 or 4-inch widths. You can get 6-inch from Kapler, but you need something wider. Well, that's where you lay it flat on a piece of glass and edge glue it together and build up your sides to be whatever height or width you really want. It's not a big deal. So there's a left and a right. Make sure you get the clapboard right side up or right side down, depending on how your perspective is. But so you have a left and a right. So how's this all going to go together? Well, there's a lot on this slide. Well, in lower center, there's the front. And we've got the doors glued into place. There's a little bit of trim around the door frame opening. Just slice and dice this open with a scalpel, glue it back in place. It's actually a little bit of spring to it because I got a little tight. So the doors are actually just kind of floating in there, but they aren't anchored on the edges. There's two back pieces and there's a front piece. They all got 3/32 square stock glued to the edges. Being end grain of wood, most wood glues don't work very well. So this was done with a little bit of goo and some CA, mixed one on one surface, one on the other, slap it together on top of glass, hold it down flat. You've got the corners posts made. We've got some T-sheet. Actually, those are maintenance away car windows, but they're a nice sized window. So I have a lot of them. So we're going to use those. They're centered in the back wall, the lower back wall. The upper back wall doesn't have any windows, or I've decided not to have any windows. I could put them in later if I really wanted to. And you can see those back walls are both assembled from at least 2 pieces of scrap clapboard. I'm not going to waste any of that. Once it's glued together, it's good and stable and it's tight. There's a door over the side. That's a T-sheet door. I don't remember which one it is. Just cut the hole out, drop it in. They're not glued in place yet. They're just test fitted, so you can see where they're going to go. We'll paint those separately and glaze them and then mount them into place later. But it's always good to get the holes set first because for some reason, holes seem to get smaller as you go forward. And then you reopen them again with a scalpel blade. Probably swells the wood with a little bit of paint. So we'll put together all the parts and lots of scrap 3/32 square stock, not 3/32, 3/16, sorry. That's to give me glue surfaces and stability on the upper edges. So when I do glue a roof on there, it's going to be board by board, individual boards across the spanning the roof sheathing. And it just, see, there's another view from the back side. You can see there's more 3/16. It's all put together with carpenter's glue at this point. So carpenter's glue and the old adage, you can never have too many clamps is very true. Lots and lots and lots of little spring clamps. A little bit of carpenter's glue, some clamps, come back later, glue another couple of pieces on until you get it done. It's fairly straightforward. And another view from the other direction. Nothing too fancy here, but you can see there's also, let's see if my cursor is going to work. There it is. There's boards across the bottom. Those aren't for keeping it from warping. Those are for mounting it on a platform, which we're going to build as well. So we need something to glue it down. Gluing down the edges of wood just is too problematic to be confronted with. It's a lot easier to add a much wider surface unless you're going to do an interior. So if you're going to do an interior, well, maybe next month we'll do something with an interior. I don't know. It's random access out of the files. So until we get any plans on where we're going. We're going to stay away from interiors for a while. And there's our platform, which is actually quite a bit larger than the actual structure. I think, well, I don't know if I have a picture of it sitting on it, but it's a large platform. There's going to be a lot of area for piling other stuff, because without a naked building by itself, without stuff to pile around it, is very naked, oddly enough. So we're going to add things to it. And it's just I think it's HO 3x22 or something like that. I have a surplus of it, so it got used for this. And the underside is some 3/16 balsa and some 3/16 by probably 1/16 pine, actually, from Kapler, just to give it some stability and a gluing surface. And we're never going to really see this, but it's just there to hold it all together. I'm using the balsa wood for no particular reason other than the fact that I got a bundle of it in the mail. So the fastest way to make it go away is to put it to use somewhere where I won't see it, and for now, and I'll probably end up using it for interior, not bracing, but gluing surfaces. It's nice to work with, it easy to cut. So here, we'll just start the roof. And this is just more, let's see, HO 3x22. And we're starting one board at a time. The tricky part here on this is you want some overhang. So these first two boards right here, the bottom two boards on both roofs are actually edge glued together first, and then they're mounted to the building frame, so I can get a nice healthy overhang and not have, this little tiny board barely glued in place and then break it off later. So it's assembled as a unit. So making a 3x44 piece effectively. And we just work our way up to the top. Over in the back, we're working our way from top and bottom, because I had to put a little mortise relief on each side of this to slide it in snug against the clapboard. And it's glued right here, on both ends onto the interior 3x16 bracing for gluing surface. But that leaves the middle of this flopping about. It's nothing supporting it. So inside is another piece of 3x22 overlapping it, tying it into the base of the clapboard. So you just slop a little extra carpenter's glue in it, slide it into place. Nobody's going to ever see it, but it's all going to hold it together nice and stiff and secure. And I'm betting this might actually even be my last slide if I'm lucky. Hey, I called it. So we're going to stop there, and that's a quick little shot. And I don't know what we're going to do next week with this, because I haven't done it yet. We'll just make it up as we go. So any questions about anything, now's your time to throw the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune.
Martin, what kind of scalpel blades do you use when you're cutting through the siding?
I don't. Okay, cross grain, I don't.
Okay.
Cross grain, I'm using a regular utility knife up against a steel ruler. With the grain, I'm using a number 10 and cutting it right at the edge of where two clapboards meet. So there's actually a ledge there that you could ride against if you're really, really gentle. So that's why I use a number 10, so you can be really gentle and not slide off into no man's land and ruin your piece of clapboard.
All right, thank you.
Martin,
Yes, sir.
you've mentioned many times using goo and CA.
Yeah.
Is that kind of a 50-50 thing, or?
Okay. It's a smear on the most porous surface, and the CA goes on the least porous surface. You slap them together, they have a little party, and they never come apart again. So you get it right, because you got about 9 seconds.
Okay. Thank you.
It's pretty irretrievable unless you take a razor saw or a scalpel to it to carve it apart. Poor man's epoxy. or whatever you want to call it.
Is there a precise measurement for slap it on?
A precise measurement? Have I ever made a precise measurement of anything?
I just had to say.
You just had to set me off. I know.
Let me ask you this question.
Okay.
I'm a beginner. Never
Okay.
done scratch building before. So far, what you've shown us tonight, where am I going to have the most problem? Doing what you did tonight, what's going to cause me the most problems starting out?
Gosh. Probably gluing up the sides of the clapboard and getting it even and tight, because the edges aren't usually perfectly straight. I mean, they sell it as if it's straight, but you need to sand a little bit. You need to weight it down edge to edge and put some glue in it. And you need a really good work surface. So, everybody likes to use, I don't know what everybody else uses. I'm on plate glass. I've got four pieces of that are 2 by 3 feet. Even if you glue it down with carpenter's glue, it pops right back off the glass, but it is flat. So, you want to build on top of something flat. I think that's really critical for everybody. And you want something that's forgiving, that, you can get it back off the flat. You can glue stuff to glass and have it not come off, or you have to, what's the polite word? Persuade it to come off. It has happened.
So what you're talking about matching the two pieces of wood together?
Yeah, the edges of the side.
That's kind of trial and error until you've got it just really where you want it before you put glue on it.
Yeah, you want to have a pretty good idea of. I mean, I'm actually gluing up a far larger piece than I actually need, and then cutting it to what I need. So you don't want to try and guess and make the individual pieces. Assemble more than you need, slice away the excess. You're going to sacrifice some. It's not going to, it's not worth your time to try and get all the pieces perfect up front. So, have some extra so you can slice and dice off the waste. It's going to be waste. Sorry, it's going to happen.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else have any questions for Martin? Thanks so much, Martin. We really appreciate it. Now I want to introduce somebody that hasn't been on the show before, Andy Spinelli. Andy is the Vice President and the Superintendent of Building and Grounds for the Continent Railway Museum. And I found out about the museum because there was a motor car that I saw a picture of. And I thought, gee whiz, I want to build that. So to get more information about it, I found out that it was at this museum. And then when I contacted the museum, I got in touch with Andy. And Andy, by the way, had been maintaining this car for a long time. So he offered to send me the plans for it and to help me with any questions that I may have. So we started talking about his museum, and I asked him to be a guest on the show. So Andy, welcome. I'm so glad that you're able to be here this evening.
There we go. I was muted. Thank you.
There you go. But I do appreciate so much you sending me the plans for the car, and I really did enjoy talking with you and finding out about the museum. And I wondered if you could tell everybody about it a little bit and what it's all about.
Yeah, it's really a neat museum. I mean, we probably have all been to railroad museums before, and you ride the train and go in the gift shop. The neat thing about our museum is it's an old line. It's a branch line that was built off the Chicago and Northwestern. So it's kind of like going to the East Broad Top. Everything is kind of in place as it was 100 years ago. And the line became abandoned. It first ran to a mining town. They mined ore and extracted the red pigment from the ore. And after about 12 years, they went belly up and abandoned the line. And then a few years later, they discovered quartzite. So they opened the line up and added on. And they were hauling quartzite out of the old quarry until 1960. The line was first built in the late 1800s. So it's like the hands of time have just stopped in North Freedom, Wisconsin, until we bought the place in 1963. And we've been there ever since. Our museum started in 59. And it's funny you talk about the modeling and scratch building. The way we started was collecting wooden railway cars. The railroads, as we know, was lining them up in sidings and setting them on fire. They'd come back a few weeks later with a magnet, pick up the metal pieces, and they were gone forever. So our founders wanted to preserve those cars for us to be able to enjoy, and they started collecting wooden railway cars. And after a few years, they wanted somewhere to run them. What fun is having a bunch of cars sitting on a siding? So we purchased this abandoned line, and we have been rebuilding and restoring ever since. So we picked up, multiple steam locomotives and diesel locomotives and rail cars, freight cars. We're primarily a wooden car museum. We do have some steel cars and some more modern equipment. World War II is kind of the cutoff of the museum. Anything after World War II, we don't have any bilevels or SD40-2s or anything of that nature. It's pretty much old Alcos, EMDs, and then steam power. Like I said, the neat thing about the museum, there's a bridge. You got to go drive over the Baraboo River to get to it. And it's kind of like going through gates. It's like going through into Oz. All of a sudden, everything turns into color. It goes from black and white into color. And it's really rolling back in time. I'm on the train quite often, and it's amazing how many people come and ride the train, and they're frustrated because we don't have a Wi-Fi signal, and they can't use their electronic devices. And it's kind of really neat because we're tucked in the hills, and all of a sudden you're out in the middle of nowhere when you're on the train. You can't see cars. All you see is nature. You see just what the train crews saw 100 years ago. The landscape has been untouched. So it really makes it a special place. I have fallen in love with Mid-Continent. I've been visiting probably since the 90s, but I didn't get heavily involved until probably around 2008. We had a major flood up there, and the museum was almost going to go bankrupt and go away forever. And I thought, boy, this is something that really needs to be preserved for the future, for people to go to and experience. You could go on YouTube and look at videos. You can see slides and pictures online, but there's nothing like the feeling of actually being there, riding on sectional rail in 19-teen cars, hearing the wood creak, smelling the smell of coal. It's really a three-dimensional museum.
Sounds fantastic. Where exactly is it located?
Just outside of Baraboo, Wisconsin. So
go ahead.
Baraboo is about 45 minutes from Madison. So again, we're called the Mid-Continent Railway Museum because it's kind of it's the Midwest is what we focus on. Not that we have anything against Eastern or Western railroads or the Southern or railroads like that, but it's basically CB&Q, Milwaukee Road, and a lot of the little short lines that existed that went away very quick. East Jordan and Southern. We have the only East Jordan and Southern rail car in existence. There's several other small little branch lines that maybe only had a couple cars or a couple locomotives. And again, our forefathers decided to start picking this stuff up when it was being junked. And it's really quite rare today to be able to have something or a piece from a railroad that might be the only piece that's left in existence.
I would think so. When's your museum open?
We're open Mother's Day through the end of October. And then we open up we do 2 Santa trains, a week of Thanksgiving and then the week after Thanksgiving. Then we're closed until Mother's Day.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Anybody have any questions for Andy about the museum?
Well, one last thing at the museum, you brought up the motor car.
Yeah.
And the reason why I took that on is I feel it's the most historic thing we have at the museum. It's truly a Smithsonian piece.
Yeah.
What happened was EMC, Electromotive Corporation, they started in Cleveland, Ohio. And they were buying cars from the St. Louis Car Company. They hired Thomas Edison and his lab staff. And one of the individuals, his name was Herman Lemp, to come up with an electrical control system. So Edison came up with the propulsion system. EMC bought car bodies from St. Louis Car Company. They bought engines from Winton, and they started building these gas electric cars. They wanted to put the steam locomotive out of business. And what was really neat is General Motors was always playing second fiddle to Henry Ford and the Model T. Ford Motor Company, they had everything right. Henry Ford owned his own rubber plants. He made his own gaskets. He made his own fasteners. And General Motors, they were always second fiddle in the auto industry. And GM saw what was going to happen with this technology. They saw thousands of steam engines were going to be replaced in very short order. And of course, they saw opportunity knocking. So what happened was General Motors bought EMC and became EMD, Electromotive Division of General Motors. And that is the largest manufacturer of diesel electric locomotives in the world. And they put the steam engine out of business. Well, that comes full circle because we have the oldest EMC piece of equipment in existence, and it is almost 100% original, unmolested. It's a true time capsule. It was bought by the Great Northern in 1923. And what they did was they used that car as a test bed to see how they performed maintenance costs compared to the steam locomotive. And so they ran the car 24/7 for 30 days, and they reported to the board of directors that there was over a 50% savings running this car versus running a steam engine. The car was double-ended, so you didn't have to turn it on a turntable. You didn't have to coal it. Maintenance was quite simple. So with that, Great Northern ended up buying quite a few cars, and then the other railroads followed. CB&Q, the Union Pacific, all bought similar cars after ours. Our car was then traded to the Montana Western. They ran in Conrad, Minnesota, and it was an interchange line. And again, it was just like North Freedom. It was a 20-mile line that was remote. And because of that, the car saw very little use and was not beat up. They traded it back to the Great Northern in 1966, and Great Northern ended up donating it to us. And we actually took the car out to EMD for some of the anniversaries. Tens of thousands of people have actually toured the car. It's like I said, a Smithsonian piece. And but it was sidelined because the Winton engine started mechanically failing. Yeah. And we've been very fortunate. There are currently no Winton operating engines in the United States, but we ended up getting a huge surplus of new old stock parts, probably enough to build 4 or 5 Winton engines. And we have just contracted with a company called FMW. And FMW currently has the Winton in their possession, and we are rebuilding it. So this car in probably about a year or two will be back up and running up and down the line for special occasions.
Oh, that's something. That really is special. Well, Andy, I appreciate you telling us about the museum. How about your own railroad? You're an HO scaler.
Yeah, I got my started back when I was a kid watching the Model Railroad series on PBS. Yep. And I'm actually fortunate because Alan McClellan with the Virginia and Ohio, and Don Santel, his best friend with Ohio, Michigan, and South Shore, I actually own several of their pieces that were on their railroad and featured in the model railroad magazines and movies. But I didn't have the skill set as a kid. So what I did was I joined a club. I lived in Elmhurst, Illinois at the time, and I joined the Salt Creek Society of Model Engineers. Salt Creek was formed in 1956. And the reason why I joined is not only for camaraderie, but to learn some of these skills. You learn from the masters, electrical and scenery and all these different components. Unfortunately, the Salt Creek doesn't exist today, but a bunch of the members got together and we started building our own railroads. I currently have a 2,500 square foot empire. It takes about 20 minutes to make one loop around the track. We'll probably have about 13 to 15 people in an operating session. And I have 2 freight yards, kind of just like everybody else. We do a lot of switching. I've got blue and white lights. So we go from run a 4-hour switching session in 24 hours. So we take the 24 hours and make it 4 hours. We go from dawn to dusk. Makes it very interesting doing switching under blue light conditions, trying to use picks to uncouple cars and that. But I would tell anybody, if you could find a club or a group of individuals to get to learn the skill set, not to be intimidated by the skill level or the pricing, because we all had to start somewhere. It's quite interesting because we all revere the Virginian and Ohio and what Alan McClellan did for the hobby. But when you actually look at Alan's locomotives, how simple they actually were and how he constructed them compared to the skill level of what's out there today, it's really unbelievable. You put a modern new locomotive or kit bash locomotive next to one of Alan's old engines, and Alan's looks like a toy. But people keep learning, and the hobby keeps evolving, and really learning from one another is what's going to continue to grow the hobby.
I agree with you 100%. That's why I wanted you on the show. I have the same philosophy about mentoring and the growth of our hobby is what you're saying right now. Do you model a specific period on your layout or?
Yeah, I kind of model the 70s, 80s. Okay. It's a freelance. It runs basically from a town called DeForest, Wisconsin, to about mid-state Illinois. So we do have some coal and power plants, a sawmill, some lumber yards. It's kind of, again, Midwestern railroading. I do run the Salt Creek. I've got my own Salt Creek fleet of locomotives, but it's kind of one of those free for all. If you want to run CB&Q or Milwaukee Road, go on ahead. It's what you like. If you're paying for it and it's on your dollar, you should be able to enjoy it. Mentoring, as you mentioned, the mentoring is really big. I got involved at probably about 5 years old. I was downtown Chicago with my dad, and we were riding the Burlington. At that time, they were still using the old green E9s. And we were going from Chicago to Downers Grove. I'm standing next to the engine, and the engineer looked down and said, "Hey, you want to ride in a cab?" Of course, they don't do stuff like that these days. I crawled into the cab of that E-unit, and I was hooked. And even at the Salt Creek, I was mentored by a couple. We became really, really great friends. It's that learning. So if you can take somebody who shows a little interest under your wing, you can really inspire a lot of people. And that also goes for the museum too. I was also inspired, but I have inspired others at the museum, because I always say, in the end of the day, we never own this stuff. We only rent it. Yep. We're on Earth for a short period of time. It's kind of the journey and what we hand down not necessarily the monetary items, but the knowledge. So if you can mentor someone and pass down some knowledge, that's the biggest gift you could give anybody.
I couldn't agree more. Anybody have any questions for Andy?
Andy, it's Pat here.
Yeah.
Do you have any pictures of that museum by chance?
I do, and I can send them to you. Unfortunately, I wasn't prepared with a slideshow,
right.
but I definitely could get you some photographs.
Thank you.
You have a website too, don't you, Andy?
Yep, www.midcontinentrailwaymuseum.com. Another thing that I also collect, that's collectible now these days, is amusement park trains. In Chicago here, we had a place called Kittyland, and Kittyland had a 12-inch train that was built by the miniature train company out of Rensselaer, Indiana. And I ended up purchasing that, and that got me hooked. So then I bought a 30-inch train from National Amusement Device. Came from a park down in Georgia. And the train collecting hobby is you could go for the big stuff, you could go for the models, you could build your own 7.5-inch gauge, or you could collect an actual built train that was to haul people for revenue service, but a little smaller.
Yeah. Sounds like you're heavily involved in a lot of different areas.
The whole family is. This has been a family. My wife gets involved up at the museum, and my kids are involved in the operating sessions, modeling. The whole family is really been involved in this.
Fantastic. Andy, thank you so much for joining us this evening and telling us about what you're doing as well as the museum. I really do appreciate it, and wish you the best of luck with your museum. It sounds just fantastic.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, now let me introduce the next guest, and that's Jeff Jordan. And Jeff is doing me a favor by showing everybody how to build in styrene, something that I've never been able to do up to this point. So, Jeff, I will turn it over to you, sir.
Here I am. Hopefully my internet connection is more stable tonight.
Pat, can you spotlight Jeff? Because all I'm seeing is small pictures of everybody. There you go.
Okay. And you should have my slideshow now.
I don't see, I
Not
see
yet.
you.
Share screen and into it.
That's what I did.
Is it on your PowerPoint? There you go.
Yeah, just
Got
click on
get
your
rid of that Zoom.
PowerPoint. There you go.
How about that?
That's good.
Then throw in slideshow and you're ready to go.
There we go. All right. And this is where we left off last week. Fortunately, we were at the last slide, so I was most of the way through taking those sides that we'd previously cut and adding the braces. In this case, I've used a strip material that works out as a scale 6-inch by 9-inch, or I think that's 1/8 by 3/16, and provides me a nice firm support for the corners and the horizontal pieces. And then the one thing you have to think about as you're putting your walls together is how are you going to treat the ends of the walls? There's a couple of different things you could do. You could butt one into the other and then cover that up with a trim stock. You could bevel the ends so that they butt right together. Or in this case, I did something a little different. I actually, as you can see in the middle photograph, intentionally had the two walls just corner to corner, leaving a little groove down the center, which later on I filled with a fine square strip stock, which approximated the way the prototype building was constructed, though more often I would have covered that seam with a flat stock. And then the right-hand photo on the side there shows all the walls assembled and how thoroughly braced the interior is. The one thing you can't see is in the bottom center there, where there is an interior corner. In that case, I had some L stock, and I used that on the inside to make that joint secure as well. The other thing you'll see here in the middle picture is I've left 1 scale foot of the corner stock sticking out, and that was in anticipation of adding separate plastic foundation material. That's a sheet stock that's embossed to look like stone. And also at the bottom edges of the structure, I let the horizontal piece, rather than being flush with the bottom, since it was 3/16 of an inch, there was plenty of it to glue to the wall and have a lip outstanding, so that I could cut the strip stock 1 foot tall and then glue it, as you see in the middle picture, both to that lip at the bottom of the wall and the vertical bits. And then there it is in place on the right-hand photograph. And you can see I've just worked my way around using the vertical pieces and the extended base pieces to make it nice and secure. The roof. Well, this is a southern building, and in the south, the raised metal seam roof is very popular. This building has a raised metal seam roof. They're kind of tricky to model until Evergreen Styrene came out with a terrific product. They took their basic sheet material and pre-grooved it and included in the package a very fine strip material. So you can cut the roof to your size, bearing in mind where the vertical seams are going to fall, and then insert the strip stock, and with a little plastic weld, glue each of the strips in, give you a very convincing raised seam roof without a lot of headaches. And then in anticipation of the peak of the roof there, you can see that I'm just beveling the edge a little bit to give it a nice smooth joint when I put the top together. This has got a little discussion about painting, though we'll do all the painting at once. The roof was primed with a primer, as we were discussing earlier. The Evergreen Styrene, to paint it, you really need to prime it. It's a very slick surface, even after you've cleaned off the mold release. Paint doesn't stick to it well. And a light coat of primer. I like the Tamiya's primer or some of the rattle cans you get from the hardware store that are plastic compatible to prime the entire surface and to prime the roof. And so putting the roof together, it's primed, it's painted with what I had was bottle of flat aluminum paint in the polyscale line. And the chimney in this case was a resin casting that I had purchased separately, and just did a little bit of painting to bring out the detail. You can see it in the little holder there where it's getting painted with just simple acrylic brick red paint. And then I hit it with a diluted white acrylic paint and carefully cleaned off the brick surfaces. Gives you a very effective mortar line. And then you're seeing the chimney in place in the roof, though that's skipping ahead a little bit because you have to figure out how you're going to put the chimney in there and make it stay. In this case, I had it pretty easy because, as you saw previously, there was a ridge pole in the roof. And so I could simply notch that and the chimney just drops right in and has a support, so you don't have to worry about, is the hole precisely right? Can I glue the chimney into the hole? This has something underneath supporting it. The porch floor. One of the critical elements of this building is that front porch. And I did not have on hand any scribed styrene that looked like a 6-inch board floor. So I made my own, starting with just a plain evergreen flat stock. I used my true sander just because it gave me a nice square surface to work with, and a little L bracket, and using the scale ruler, marked every 6 inches, and then came back with a square and a nice sharp X-Acto knife, scribed the lines every scale 6 inches, not bearing down too much, just enough to give you a nice square scribe line that doesn't cut through, but is distinctly visible when you're done. And again, as you can see in the next two photos, using that same 1/8 by 3/16 material and lots of clamps, glue it down. Again, I'm just using styrene plastic cement and tester's tube cement to lay out the support. And then you can see the next picture left a little overhang in the front, and there it is on the end, right side up. And you can see that the scribing effect shows up very nicely. The one thing it doesn't show too well in this photograph is where the scribe reaches the outside edge. I patiently notched each one of those, so each end, it looks very clearly like it's an individual board. Now we come to painting. As we said, the evergreen styrene needs to be primed. I often prime with a very light primer, a light gray. In this case, I tried something a little different. Since the prototype is fairly weathered, I used a Krylon dark gray primer. As you can see in the right-hand photo, everything is primed there, though I masked off the gable edges and what would ultimately be the porch roof support, so that I could cement to it later and not have to worry about scraping the paint off. But the model gets primed, and then I come back, and the left-hand photo shows the process of painting there. And it's not quite done in that photo, but it's a thinned white acrylic brushed on with the horizontal brush strokes and letting the primer show through. You got to kind of get a judgment of how you think it looks, but I like the ultimate finished effect is a weathered paint with a uneven finish, showing gray, and then the porch surface is even more gray. There, I use the white acrylic paint, but dry brushed it, literally just taking, the dry brush technique, put some paint on the brush, wipe most of the paint off on a piece of paper towel, and then drag it from the wall out to the front. And as you can see, the finished dry brushing, I think, is a very effective weathered porch deck. Adding doors. Remember from earlier that I had shown how I took the Grant Line doors, added the diagonal stock, glued it into the frame, but one of the centerpieces of the front of this building is that pair of screen doors, and nobody manufactures anything like that I could find. So I decided I needed to make my own screen door. And as you can see from the center photo, I first estimated the dimensions in the upper left-hand corner, and then using a scale ruler, drew those out very precisely to be the guide for making the door, and then using various sizes of evergreen strip styrene, took the verticals and cut them to careful height, and then taped them in place so that I could add the horizontals, making all of the joints, again, with a liquid plastic cement that sets very, very quickly. One thing I did do, since this isn't going to function, is the center there is actually a single piece of plastic, heavily scribed, so you can see the line, but it's actually a single piece, and it helped stabilize the whole thing and put it together. And then you can see there on the right-hand side, the finished effort with the edges trimmed, little door handle there just made from strip stock as well. And then the one other step that doesn't show in this photo, but will show a little later, is I had some mesh screening material left over from a kit for screen door and glued it in place from the back. And one more for tonight. This is adding windows. These are all Grantline windows. Again, on the right-hand side, you can see the windows and doors have been lightly primed. And then I came back and using the same thinned white acrylic paint, painted everything and let it get good and dry. And I think that's where I stopped this week. And next week we'll finish up with the final assembly and adding a variety of interesting details, including the signs and other stuff, which, as Martin correctly points out, the building looks very bare until you add all these interesting little details. So that's what I got for tonight, and I'll gladly entertain any questions.
Jeff, I'm a new guy, never done this before. What you showed us tonight, where am I going to have the most trouble?
Similar to Martin's comment, it's making sure you're putting your building together nice and square. Starting off with making sure as you cut out your walls that they are absolutely square, and don't trust the manufacturer's edges to be square. I have found the evergreen styrene sheets that, because they're apparently made from a huge sheet, are cut by some manufacturing process that sometimes is not dead square. So you want to check that it's square, and if it's not perfectly square, before you start fashioning it into your walls, you make sure you're working from a piece of square stock, especially with clapboard siding. You want everything to line up. So look at your sheets side by side and make sure that they all end on the bottom at the same point. Otherwise, your clapboards are not going to line up when you put the walls together. The one other thing that I really need to mention is cutting the openings for the doors and windows, which I showed last week. That really calls for some careful measuring and careful cutting, because if you're not patient and careful in cutting, you're going to end up with all your windows and doors being kind of higgledy-piggledy, not square with the siding. And the siding, because of the horizontal lines, will show very clearly if your windows and doors are square. And so you need to take your time and cut carefully. Though, again, that's one of the reasons I like the evergreen styrene is cutting it is very controllable. You can shave infinitesimally fine bits off using a sharp X-Acto blade, or you can file it with an emery type stick and make very, very fine adjustments, and keep your window or door at hand. Test frequently until you get just that right fit.
Thank you. Anybody else got any questions for Jeff? Jeff, thank you so much. I really appreciate it and look forward to seeing what you do next week.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now, Dan Roussau was supposed to be with us tonight. I looked a few minutes ago. I didn't see Dan had arrived yet. So Dan, if you're there, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll try to come back to you later. Okay. Let me now turn to Steve Sherrill and his guest to talk about dead rail or battery power. Again, this is something that I've wondered about for a long time. And frankly, judging by the number of people who are viewing the videos after the shows, as well as the number of people that are participating in the shows, there's a lot of you out there that have the same kind of interest, but don't have much knowledge about what battery power or dead rail or whatever it's called is all about, and frankly, how to get involved in it. So Steve, I really do appreciate you doing this for us and having the guest and so forth that can give us some guidance and see if we can figure out if this is for us and if it is, how we should get involved. So I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Jim. Tonight we're going to take the basic RC car control or transmitter and do a little modification with it to make it a little more familiar to our model railroad operation. And for this, I have Bob Gelmacher, who is going to present how he modified and created a new transmitter controller that I use on my railroad. He did this for me. He's made a couple of these. So Bob, if you will go ahead, please.
Okay, let's see if we can get this up and running. And can you see my my screen?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we did it right. That's good. Okay, I want to do one other thing and get a pointer option here and get to my laser. So anyway, like Steve said, we talked about using the inexpensive RC car that you can buy on eBay. I think you can buy some on Amazon. I bought a couple of them at like the local Ollie's and see what we can do with it. Steve has already talked about what you can do with the receiver that sits in the car itself. And tonight I'm going to talk about the throttle or the hand controller. And let me start with this. So when you buy one of these little cars, and I would say that the car is probably about maybe 4 or 5 inches long, it comes with two parts. The first part is the car itself, and that's where the motor is and the receiver. And the other part is this pistol-looking type of device that actually controls the car. And that's a better, closer up look at that. And there's a couple of functions on this that are kind of important to us. Number one, on the side, it has an on-off button. And the other thing is when that on-off button is thrown to the on position, the receiver tries to talk to the car itself. And when it does, is that little red light there starts to blink until it syncs up with the car. And then once it does sync up, or once it's paired, depending on what word you want to use, the red light goes solid. So you know, number one, that the power is on, and number two, that you are actually talking to the car that you're trying to control. On the front, there's this big wheel, and that is nothing more than a left-right control. It controls a couple of little motors that are in the wheels, the front wheels, and it either turns them to the left or turns them to the right. And the one that we're really interested in is this speed control right here. And that is a trigger and spring-loaded control. When you pull it back, the car actually goes forward. And when you push it forward, the car actually goes backward. And it returns to a center point, and that's the stop point where the car just stops dead. So what we have to do is we have to take this and try to convert all this into something that is usable for our model railroading. On the back side of this, there are two things. Number one is the antenna. And as it turns out, when we took it apart, the antenna is nothing more than a blank plastic shell, has no function whatsoever, but there is a little antenna in the device. And a very important part is this battery case. And the battery case takes 2 AA batteries. So this whole thing is run, the transmitter part of it is run on about 3 volts. Now, the controller works fine for the cars, and it can control a train, but there are some issues with it. Number one is that spring-loaded trigger that used to control the speed. It's really tough to maintain control because you're constantly fighting against the spring itself. And it does require the operator to keep his finger on that control for the entire duration of the use of the machine. And that's pretty tricky. So, and a lot of the other things that we use, we set a dial or something, and then we're finished with it. There is no fascia pocket or holder that I'm aware of where this would look good on any layout. And number 4 is that the form factor for this is not something that we as model railroaders are used to. So what do we do about that? Well, what we did was we said we can convert the functionality of that device from what you see on the left-hand side, which is the trigger itself, to that little box on the right-hand side. And that's exactly what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. Now, I'll say up front that I'm not going to go into a lot of electrical theory. I'm not going to go into a lot of circuit description. I just want to show you what the mechanical requirements are to get from one to the other. We can talk about the electronics in it at some other time if you want to. This box does the same functionality as that controller. Number 1, it does have a power switch. And when you throw that power switch on, that light does blink again, and it blinks until it syncs up with the receiver in the car, or actually now in the locomotive or the tender. And then we have a direction and speed control, but this time we can actually set that to a predetermined value or a predetermined speed and take our hands off of it, and it'll stay just like any other controller that we're used to. When we open up that box or the controller that comes with the car, there's a couple of components inside that we have to be aware of. And I will use my pointer here. Is number 1, a board that you see on a side view here is the main board. And that main board is where the little transmitter sits. And that is the connections for everything else is in here. That antenna that I talked about before, which is here, is just that blank cone. The actual antenna for this is about a 2-inch piece of wire that is just wired to this main board. And of course, we have to make sure that that stays intact because we need that antenna in order to communicate with the receiver. There's a little potentiometer that sits right behind the trigger here, and the trigger bounces back and forth. And that pot is what talks to the main board and then sends the signal over to the receiver to say, how fast do we want to go? And in what direction do we want to go, forward or backwards? The switch itself to turn this unit on sits behind this board, as does the LED. And the batteries sit in the other side of the handle. This is a molded piece, and you'll see in a few minutes that we really can't use this piece too much. Okay, so if we take away the plastic, the components again are that main board that sits there, and this is the transmitter board. That big dial that we showed before actually activates these 2 little push buttons. And as it turns out, for what we're doing tonight, these push buttons are not necessary. What I want to do is I want to play with this a little bit in weeks to come and to see whether or not these push buttons can actually turn lights on. But they really don't have anything to do with the speed or the direction of a locomotive once we have it in there. This is that auxiliary board where we have the switch and the LED, and that's connected back up here to the main board. And then this is the little pot that actually controls the speed. This is the pot that is regulated by that little spring trigger. And this is the other side of the board. So I've stripped off some of the wires, and this is the trace. Now, one of the issues that I've run into with this is that we have no idea what this chip actually is programmed to do. A lot of chips that we work with, you can find out exactly what program goes into it. You can modify that program if you want to. But this chip, I haven't been able to find out a whole lot about it. So I have to take what they give me and work with it. And it has some other little resistors here, some small stuff. But this is what we call the trace side of the board. This is where the circuit is. And this is the other side, and with a couple of the other components. A critical step at this point is once you get this out of that handheld controller, before you start disconnecting anything, I always say it's a good idea to map all the wiring. And by that I mean is to make sure you know where every wire is going to and where every wire is coming from. And if you take a look at that board that we were just showing you, there are different designations on the board and every wire, for instance, on that main board, there's a little mark marked as A, and you can see that the black wire from the potentiometer is going into that port and all the way down. The same thing with the aux board. Once we have that information, then we can start disassembling that motherboard or the main board and picking off the components that we need. And after you do all that, this is what we can salvage out of that entire trigger mechanism. The only thing that we're able to reuse is actually the most important thing in there, and that's the main board. So you can see there's the designations that I was talking about, the A and the B and the plus and minus and the D, and we can go back to that chart that I just had, and they correspond to these numbers, and we know where those wires were coming from and going to. Other things that we need in order to complete the project is, number one, we need a case. This particular case is put out by a company called, and I can't read it too well, but anyway, it's about a 2.5 by 4.5 inch case, and it's about 1 inch thick. And as it turns out, it's just the right size for doing what we want to do. It fits in your hand nicely. The nice thing about the case also is that it has a little door here that fits into this area, which gives us access to the batteries, which I'm going to show you in the next slide. The second thing that we need is a battery holder. And these things, I think I got about 8 or 10 of them off of Amazon for next to nothing. And as it turns out, they fit nicely inside of that case. And they're going to hold 2 AA batteries, just enough power to power this mechanism. Some other things that we had to get is, number one, we had to get a potentiometer. And this is going to replace that potentiometer that was actually in the device. When I measured that, it looks like it's about 5,000 ohms. So I picked up a pot about the same value. We have the switch down here. I had that in my toolbox. This is a 5 millimeter red LED. That's going to be our on indication and also tell us whether or not the device has been synced up. I have a little mount here, and this is nothing more than a little plastic grommet that helps to hold that LED in place. It makes the project look a little more professional. And then a resistor. And the reason why we put that resistor in there is because the pot or the potentiometer that's in the device doesn't swing from a 0 point to a max point. There's mechanical blocks in that trigger that keeps it at a point where it goes no longer than about 600 ohms. I think if we let it go below 600 ohms, we probably would burn this whole system out. So in order to ensure that it doesn't, I used a resistor, and I think this is a 570, and put it on one of the leads on the potentiometer in a picture I'll show you in a little bit, to make sure that we maintain that level so that we don't burn out the main board. The next point is, next slide is, I took the case and I have the cover off, the side off that has that little door that I was showing you about. And it's always a good idea to test fit the components. So here I've got the battery holder in there and it fits just right. And I also put the motherboard in there. What I found on this particular case is there's a couple of little grooves that you see here that are used to put in separate dividers if you want to do it that way. This is one of the posts that the screws is going to hold the back to it. But when I try to wrap the wire from the power around through here, it gets a little bit tight. So what I decided to do, and what I recommend, is that you might want to take a little X-Acto knife and carve off this so that you have a little room to wrap those 2 wires around, and that'll be fine. Also, that I didn't highlight here, there's a divider that's built into the case, and that divider is just a little too snug for the installation of the battery component. So it's very easy to take and just fatigue that piece, bend it back and forth just a little bit until it snaps off, and then the battery case will fit just the way it should. The next step, once you have those fitted, take them out and then drill the holes for the LED, for the switch, and for the potentiometer that are going to stick through. Now, as I say in here, results may vary depending on the particular type of hardware that you buy. The size of those holes is going to vary. So what I always do is I will drill a hole that's a little bit smaller than the actual size that I need, and I will work my way up to that size by taking a reamer and slowly reaming out the hole. You want to have it snug. You don't want to have it too loose, because then you just have a sloppy piece of equipment. The other nice thing about this particular box is across the top here, there's a flat piece of plastic that slides in a groove and also mates up with the other side. So you could very well, and it might be the better way of doing it, is take the hole that you're going to put in for the LED and the hole that you're going to put in for the switch and mount them up here. That leaves a little more room that you can move the potentiometer up a little bit. And I think it's going to make a better job. We didn't do that on the first two, but we're going to do it on the next couple. And then this is what it looks like with everything mounted. And a couple of things that I mentioned is that, number one, before you do and place any parts in permanently, it's a lot easier to add leads to the main board and add leads that are going to be maybe 2 or 3 inches longer than you think you're going to need on the final product. Because once you have that board in place, it's really tough to solder to, especially since the trace is on the other side. So I added all those leads first before I actually glued it in. Once I have that in there, then I use something called E6000 to glue the battery holder and the main board in place. E6000 will not conduct electricity. So even if I put the glue on the trace side and stick it in there, it stays. And E6000, when it dries, it's going to be a very firm glue, but it also is a little bit flexible. So if you had to tear this out for some reason, you probably could. Again, before I soldered or I actually glued the LED, which is here, is I very carefully added wires to the leads on that. You don't want to solder too long on the LEDs because you could burn them out, but at least we have those leads on there, and then you can cut them to length as you need them. I mount the switch, the LED, and the potentiometer, and then make all the remaining connections. This is one of the reasons why I'm going to go back. I'm not going to physically go back, but I'm going to mention that slide where I said you want to map all of the leads, because that'll give you a really good idea of exactly what gets connected to what. Now, in this particular case, I left some of the wires originally on the main board, and I left them on there, and I just spliced them in, as you can see here, to some of the other leads that I needed. I was not crazy about this area here. It's a little bit tight, but as long as I made sure that nothing was really touching in there, I felt comfortable that it would work. And then here's that 600 ohm resistor that I mentioned that's on one of the legs of the pot, to make sure when we use that pot, we never go below the 600 ohms in firing up this main board. And lastly, on the front side of this thing is, we added the dial, and I picked up a number of dials off of Amazon. And then I think Steve added the lettering on this, and we had a completed project, and we found that it worked very, very well. It gives you a lot of control on the train. In this case, forward is just the opposite direction that it should be, but depending on how you wire the pot would make a difference whether forward is to the left or to the right. Not a critical issue here, but it works well. And we plan to make more of these. Now, there are more expensive solutions. There are more expensive car transmitter cases that you can buy. The components are going to be bigger, but you wind up getting the same result. So I think it was a real good project, and I'm estimating right now that it probably cost about $20 for the components. So when you add that to the cost that Steve has already talked about for the car controller set, it might cost you, $40 or so in order to get a train running on dead rail. But it works very, very well. So with that, I'll entertain any questions that anybody might have.
Bob, I have one question.
Sure.
That potentiometer, does that control both your forward and reverse as well as your speed?
Yes.
So your speed runs from forward to the center?
Yes.
And from reverse to the center.
Right. Now, there's probably ways that we could get around that. We could probably put 2 pots in if we wanted to. But the way the original device was built with that spring-loaded trigger is when you let that trigger go, it springs back to a center point, and that center point is stop. So we and again, I wasn't sure, and I'm still not sure exactly what the programming is in the chip on the transmitter board. So without having that information, I said, I will build around whatever I have to work with. And that's what we had to work with.
Thanks, Bob.
Bob, this is Greg.
Yes. Yeah.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
I just want to let everyone else know, I got to play with this controller and one of Steve's locomotives at the New Track Scholarship table at Timonium last weekend. And Steve spent a lot of time explaining to me, okay, you got to turn it to the forward to go forward. Then you got to move it back and move it to the art. I swear to God, when I picked this up, it was so intuitive and so easy to use. You could get fancier, but I don't really see any need to.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah.
Rob, let me ask you a question. The potentiometer,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
is that a rheostat?
A rheostat is a potentiometer, but a potentiometer is not a rheostat. Okay, if that makes any sense.
No.
Well, a rheostat is a device that's going to control voltage, and it's built specifically to do that. And it has a potentiometer built into it. This is not made to, and I think of rheostat as being something that's going to control maybe something at 120 volts or something along those lines. This is not made to control anything like that. This is mainly to vary the resistance. And by varying the resistance, you are varying the voltage, but I would not call it a rheostat. No,
Gotcha.
I mean, anybody who works with this kind of stuff is going to call it a potentiometer or a pot, a variable resistor. That's what it amounts to.
Gotcha. Okay. Anybody else have any questions for Bob?
You know,
Bob?
one of the things,
Bob,
Yes.
I have a question. Will you be making this controller, the plans available if we want?
I can, yeah. But I have to make it with the specific car controller set that we are using. So I know I've bought maybe a couple of these cars, and Steve has lent me a couple of the car triggers to do. And most of the ones that we work with so far look like they all are the same. But I can't say that if you pick up any car trigger combination at any store that the components are going to be the same and the wiring is going to be the same. I can only give some general guidelines on that.
Bob, let me ask you this. You say that this could be a basic kind of first solution for somebody that might be interested in dead rail.
Yeah.
The controller,
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that could work with a more sophisticated locomotive installation of another kinds of receiver and so forth? In other words, can this controller just be the controller for whatever you would upgrade the locomotive to?
I can't say that that would be true, Jim, because the frequency might be the same, but the functions that the receiver is looking for and the signal that the transmitter is sending out, I just don't know whether they would be compatible. Most of these run on 2.4 gigahertz.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going after when we look for the cars and things like that. If I go to a yard sale, if I find a 2.4 gig device, I'll buy it. But I think everyone is going to be different, especially I saw some combinations on, was it Amazon or eBay? But anyway, they were like $59 or $60 combinations. And the people that had them were saying that they were a very generic type of combination. I'm sure that if you dug into them, they would have the same type of components, but I can't guarantee you that those components and the stuff that we just did are going to be 100% compatible. It's going to be a trial and error.
Gotcha. Let me ask you this. If the only thing in the locomotive that you changed was the battery,
okay,
and left everything else like it was in the locomotive, then would that upgrade still work?
Well, I don't think that we can, that's a multiple point question. I don't think that we can leave the locomotive just the way it is, because if you have a system already that's either DC or DCC, you're getting your power through the rails, which means you're picking it up through the wheels, and to the contacts that are on the wheels up to the motor. For a dead rail system like this, I would probably, matter of fact, I will disconnect the motor from the wheels altogether. I don't want to have any connection down to that track. And then wire the motor leads back through the engine itself. And actually, if I had enough room in the engine, I'd put it in the engine. But most of the time on my ON30 stuff, I'm not going to have that room. So I would actually wire it back to a tender and or a secondary tender and have everything back there. So no, I would think that you can't just hook it up to the motor and let it go without modifying the engine a little bit.
Okay, so now I've modified the engine.
Right.
And I'm using the battery that came with the car.
Okay, the battery and the receiver that came with the car.
Yes.
Yes.
If I change that battery in the receiver that came with the car to a larger battery, that's the only change I make, will everything else work?
No, because for instance, the receiver that we were using here, that little main board, they designed that so that it works with a certain voltage. If we were to put more voltage on that board, we'd probably blow it out. For instance, and I think we talked about this last time, is that we're only going to be able to put out probably about 3 to 3.5 volts to the engine motor. So it's going to go relatively slow. Where I know that a lot of motors in our engine, especially my ON30 stuff, would like to see 12 volts to run it at really a faster speed. If we try to put a bigger battery on there, I'm afraid we probably would blow that board out. The components just couldn't handle the actual additional current and voltage that we put on there. So these have to be matched up and rated.
Gotcha.
Wish I had better news there, but that's the facts of life.
So if we're trying to, okay, so I think I understand the limitations of this unit.
Mm-hmm.
So now I want to buy the car kit, I guess, that'll allow me to have the 12-volt battery. What is?
I think what you'd have to do a little bit of research and check the specs on the box of the car kit that you're buying, and they should have on there the size of battery that is needed in the car in order to make the car run. I mean, I've seen ones that are, matter of fact, I've got one right here. Where is it? This battery is a little bit bigger if you can see it. And it is a 7.4 450 milliamp hour battery. So that's going to give a little more oomph to that receiver, consequently a little more drive to the motor. But you're talking about probably getting bigger receivers when you do that, and then you got to worry about the size constraint on your engine, whether or not you can put that receiver in there or in a tender.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Remember now, this is just introduction basic. This is probably the minimum that you can get for dead rail. It's 3.7. The price is the lowest you're going to get. When you want bigger engines, larger scales, you're going to have to step up and go to something like Loco-Fi or some of the other manufacturers that are making this units that will allow you to have more voltage through them, through the boards. So you have to understand that this is very basic stuff here.
Yeah.
Now, one of the reasons why I actually got Bob involved in these this type of controller was I tried everything I could to make that handheld pistol grip work. I got it to work forwards and backwards, but I tried things like taking the spring out, thinking if I pull it back a little bit, would it hold at that point? No, it won't. I tried making the finger holder, modifying that, making that bigger, making it the front, cut it down so it would be easier to fit my personal finger. Didn't work. So that's why we ended up doing this type of system. Now, we'll say this controller will control one of the locomotives that we have. It will also control any of this type of locomotive. So if I have 10 of these, this particular controller, all I have to do is hook up each one of these separately, and I can run it. Now, I hope that's understandable. You know.
So
I need-
what you're saying is the box that we see on the screen, that'll run one locomotive
at a time. I can run any of the locomotives that have this system. Okay.
with this box that I'm seeing on the screen.
This box right here, exactly.
So how do I tell which locomotive I'm going to run with the box I see on the screen?
Well, you have to, you see the little red light, that's going to flash. Okay. Now, when you turn on the receiver in a particular locomotive, the one you selected, that red light will go solid. You know you will have that locomotive.
You lost me. I can't see you. All I can see is the box. Maybe
but I'm showing, I'm telling you on the big picture here. When I turn this switch on,
I can't see the big pictures, I guess. I see you down in the bottom, little bitty picture.
I'm gonna stop my share.
Yeah.
That way you can see everything. If I can get down there. Come on. And Jim, to answer your question quickly, is that if you have 10 locomotives, the one that you turn on is the one that's going to talk to this box.
Right.
And
Okay.
how do I know which one that is?
Hold on.
That's the one you turn on.
How
Okay.
do I turn? I didn't know I had to turn the locomotive on. I thought all of them were ready to go.
Well, they're ready to go, but you got to remember that you have to turn them off because you can't have the battery on all the time. You wouldn't want that to be the case because it's even though it might not be running.
So I got to flip the battery switch on the locomotive I want to run, and then I can run any one of those 10 with this same box.
You got it.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Everybody leave?
No, I don't think so.
You see the flashing light?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know.
Right there, right.
So I have a locomotive right
That's
here.
good. Leave it alone right there.
Right there.
Hold on. What's going on here? Hold on. I want no failure. This thing is.
It's called it's called the presentation curse.
No.
It ran yesterday.
You don't have how many trade shows I've been where we would spend an hour getting everything ready, and doors would open and poof, gone.
Have I run my battery down now?
No, not yet.
I must have left it on. Anyway, that's what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me say something too about that Loco-Fi system that we talked about last week. Steve let me borrow it, and after I read the instructions, that's its critical part. After I read the instructions, it works like a charm. And I had that hooked up to one of my ON30 moguls, and I was able to run the thing at full speed. Now I did have a 12-volt power supply hooked up to it, but I tested it at lower voltages. And if somebody's looking for a nice, relatively inexpensive dead rail entry point. I was really pleased with it.
Okay.
Well,
Steve, Ken
yeah.
Meyer.
Ken Meyer, hold it. Let me introduce you, Ken. This is Ken Meyer. He works closely with Locofi. He has been in RC control for over 40 years, I think he told me, Ken, but it's in airplanes he started out. So he's very experienced. He's going to make a presentation about Locofi on November the 8th. The owner of Locofi will be on with him, and they are going to be showing an install operation, how to hook it up with the phone. They're going to do everything that we did tonight, except they're going to do it with what I call the next stage in RC. The Locofi can go in any scale and can take up to what, 24 volts, I think.
24, starting with 7 up to 24.
Right. So that will cover anything that, any scale that we have. So go ahead, Ken. You can ask your question now, or whatever.
Oh, I just wanted to say with Bob, Locofi works really well. I have been physically using Locofi for more than a year, close to a year and a half. I haven't got a steam engine to put the steam system in yet, but I've had 2 diesels running, ran one today because I charge batteries and just wanted to play with trains. I just love using it. And the plan is to show you how I physically installed it in the 2 locomotives I have, how it hooks up together, and show you a little bit of it running around the track and making noise if you want noise, or if you don't want noise, you don't have to have noise. So it's really good. It's really fun. Works well.
Ken, the problem that I had was I didn't see the part that said hook it up to the Locofi Wi-Fi. I tried to hook up to my local house Wi-Fi.
You can do that.
Yeah, you can do it. It won't work, but you can do it.
No, I run mine through my local.
Do you?
Yes. To do it, when you, I'm not going to go into it.
No, that's okay. I believe it. I believe it.
No, I run mine through there, just because it works really, really well. Either way, the little, if you want to call it Wi-Fi that's on board that you hook it up to, works just fine.
Yeah.
But it works really well. If you've got your local, you've got it hooked up without it being through the Wi-Fi. When you go back in, you can, I forget what it is off the top of my head. Add loco.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're already have it running, the 2 are paired up, your phone and the Wi-Fi board. Then you put in your password to your Wi-Fi at home, and it will go through the routine where it hooks up, and then it will hook right up.
That's good to know.
Like on your phone, no, I don't want to take a lot of time, but on your phone, when you originally hook up the Wi-Fi and you got your home Wi-Fi, they'll show up in the connections place as 2 different Wi-Fi units. But after you get it hooked up to your Wi-Fi at home, it won't ever show up again. And the reason I did that was if there was any little problem and it lost something for a second or so, then when it reconnected, it kept wanting to reconnect to my Wi-Fi at home. So I said, well, I'll put it on there so it's networked or whatever you want to call it to my home Wi-Fi. It's real easy. Just add loco. And when you don't have, if you don't enter a password, it just assumes you want to use the Wi-Fi on the Locofi unit in your locomotive. But if you enter a password, that's when it meshes, I think is what they call it, with your home Wi-Fi. And did Steve give you my phone number if you got any questions?
I haven't given to him yet. Okay, Ken?
Well, you told me you would.
Well, yeah. I'm a couple hours off.
I'll get it, Ken. Yeah, but I was pleasantly surprised how well it made everything run.
It does. It's
Yeah.
it's amazing. It really is amazing. And I'll try to get something together so that everybody else can see how amazing it actually
I'm
is.
looking forward to your conversation.
Ken, please, for my benefit, could you try to keep it simple? I mean, very, my third or fourth grade level works for me on this stuff.
Well, you missed me by a year because I was a 5th grade teacher. So it might be over your head. I don't know what to tell you, Jim.
Bob can explain that my knowledge is very, very minimal.
Hey, it was a battery situation. So you can see it flashing.
There.
Now I'm connected to the locomotive. Okay. And I'm running it on the floor now.
Now, let me ask you this. If I want to switch locomotives, then I have to turn the battery off of the locomotive that I'm on, and then turn the battery on the other locomotive. And then what do I have to do to the hand unity? Do I have to press the on button?
You have to start all over. You have to flip your button again. Now, you've turned this locomotive off. You're going to go over to the locomotive you want to start. Okay, now, if I turn this on right now, there's no locomotive hooked up. It's going to flash like that. So I know I don't have this locomotive. So I turn it back off. I go over and I say, I want to start a steam engine. I turn the battery on. I turn this on. This will then go solid here. And I now have control to that locomotive.
Gotcha.
Now, if I have 2 of these, I can have one controlling this with that procedure I just showed you. And I can have the other one controlling that one over there doing the same repeat procedure. They won't interfere with each other. So I can have one operator can operate this one. The other operator can operate that one. Does that answer your question?
So Steve, does that mean that those units are, the transmitter and receivers are paired together?
Only if I pair them together. In other words, one won't interfere with the other. It's like any of these 2.4 gigahertz systems. They don't interfere with you. It's like your cell phone. Your cell phone has the same 2.4 gigahertz, but my cell phone doesn't interfere with your cell phone. All right.
Let me ask you this, Steve. If I pick up a control, let's say that I've got 5 locomotives, 5 controllers. I pick up controller number 1. I go to locomotive number 2 and start that battery. Then controller number 1 will operate locomotive number 2.
Yes.
If I go and I pick up the next controller and turn it on and turn the battery on, or don't turn another battery on, that controller will not control back the same locomotive the other controller is controlling.
No, that's right.
So I have to have a second locomotive then that I've turned on for that second controller.
Yes. And what we have found is we like to have separate controllers assigned to each engine. Okay. That makes it easy. I know when I pick up number 2 and I have a number. So here's a different manufacturer. You can see I have a 7 on here. That's for locomotive number 7, which is on this little layout back here. Now, I would do the same thing for this. I only have 2 of these. And so what I do is I have them at different places on my railroad. So I can leave them there, turn it off here, and then turn it on over there and get it to work leave the controller here. It doesn't make any difference. Just remember, this controller controls one engine. Whatever you assign to this controller is the engine you will control. If you turn it off so you don't control it anymore, you can then go to another engine and control that one. But the first engine has to be turned off. Okay? But if I have this engine turned on over here, and I have another controller over here, I now have two trains that can run. Is that clear?
Yep.
It's almost, well, you don't have DCC, you have DC. So I don't know how you run more than one trolley on without having a rheostat type situation. I don't even know if you can do that with overhead.
I use diodes.
Okay, then anyway, you can run one of these with one locomotive.
Yep.
It could be any locomotive as long as you are bound or bind with a locomotive. Once you're bound with that locomotive, you can't bind at the same time with two locomotives.
Got it.
Okay?
Got it. Yep.
So,
Hey, Jim, it's sort of like a guy walking into a room with 10 women. You can go over and talk to one woman, and then you can disconnect that conversation and go over and talk to another woman, but you're only talking to one woman at a time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
You know, thanks, Bob.
That's okay.
You got to keep it simple for me, Steve.
You know, some of the things that I've learned to do to help me know when batteries need charging or locomotives I have used for a while is I take these little clips and I set them on the rail in front of this one says charge. So I know that this locomotive that I have in front of, that this is in front of, it says charge. I know that I need to charge that locomotive, the battery in that locomotive, okay? So that's just some of the things I do. I have made up several of these and set them around the railroad. And then and sometimes I keep a log in a little index card of the batteries that I've used, you know, X number of days. I know that, you know, it's going to be low, so I'm going to have somebody over. I know that I need to take that locomotive battery and charge that up full, so it'll be ready when people come over to run. And those are things you just know how to do. You just develop your own type system.
Anybody have any more questions for Bob or for Steve or Ken? Well, thank you so much for the explanations tonight, guys. I mean, I think I'm starting to understand this slow but sure.
Well, I have a little more. I don't know if I have any more time. You know, I don't know what you have left. But anyway, I've got one more segment where I'm going to show taking the stuff out of the car. I'm going to take the car, take it apart, and show how we get all the parts we're going to put in the engine.
Why don't you do that next week?
I will. That's what I'm going to do. And then we'll have Loco-Fi on the 8th. Yep. And then after that, we're going to go back to, you know, what do you want to talk about?
Sounds good.
I won't have anything up to say.
Well, if there are no more questions for anybody, then we'll move on here. Okay, well, I've looked and I still don't see Dan was able to show up this evening. So this is the end of our show tonight. Hope you've enjoyed it. We do have a caboose for you.
underneath the thing on the ground. I don't know why they didn't throw it in the trash can. They had to clean that up. The yard signs. Yeah, someone just ripped them off and threw them underneath the bench seat. Not the who or why. When they get there.
Well, that's the end of our show this evening, folks. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Most importantly, I hope you learned something. After all, that's what the shows are all about. So have a great week. Best of modeling to you, and we'll see you next Wednesday.